The first humans in the Philippines, a 67,000-year-old mystery. Somewhere beneath the limestone hills of northern Luzon, in a cave that has been dark for tens of thousands of years, a single human foot bone lay buried in the soil. It had been there longer than agriculture, longer than writing, longer than every civilization that history has ever recorded, combined. In 2007, a team of archaeologists digging in Callao Cave in Cagayan province pulled it from the ground. A third metatarsal, a small, curved bone from the middle of a human foot. When it was dated, the result stopped the scientific community cold. 67,000 years old. 67,000 years. The Philippines, a chain of islands in the middle of the sea, had been home to human beings for longer than anyone had previously proven. Longer than the conventional story of how our species spread across the planet had allowed for. And that single foot bone was only the beginning. Part 1. The cave that opened. A door. Callao Cave is not an obscure or difficult place to find. It sits in the Peña Blanca protected landscape in Cagayan province, northern Luzon, a system of 7 interconnected chambers carved by the Pinakanawan River through limestone over millions of years. Locals have known about it for generations. It has a chapel inside one of its chambers. Tour boats bring visitors up the river to see it. But its deepest levels, the sediment layers beneath the surface that most visitors never see, were hiding something extraordinary. Aerial shot descending into a cave mouth in tropical karst limestone, green jungle above, darkness below, shaft of natural light entering from the roof. The excavations that began in Callao Cave in the early 2000s, led by Filipino archaeologist Armand Mijares and his team, were careful, methodical work, the kind of painstaking layer-by-layer excavation that takes years to produce results. What they eventually found, at a depth corresponding to the oldest layers of occupation, was a collection of small bones. 12 bones and teeth in total, from what appeared to be at least 3 individuals, possibly more. A foot bone, finger bones, teeth, and with them, the bones of animals that appear to have been processed as food: deer, pig, monitor lizard, freshwater turtle. These were not the remains of people who stumbled accidentally into a cave and died. This was evidence of people living here, eating here, surviving here, 67,000 years ago, at minimum. Part 2. Homo Luzonensis, a new species of human. Now comes the detail that elevated this discovery from remarkable to extraordinary. When Mijares and his international team of researchers analyzed those bones in detail and published their findings in the journal Nature in 2019, they reached a conclusion that no one had expected. The bones did not belong to modern humans. They belonged to a previously unknown species. The team named it Homo Luzonensis, the human of Luzon. Scientific illustration, a reconstruction of Homo Luzonensis, small-bodied, the features deliberately uncertain and carefully rendered. The illustration emphasizing what is unknown as much as what is known. Homo Luzonensis was small. The bones suggest a body significantly smaller than modern humans. Its foot and hand bones showed a mosaic of features, some resembling modern humans, others resembling far more ancient human relatives, like Australopithecus, a genus most associated with Africa and thought to have predated modern human ancestors by millions of years. This mosaic pattern, ancient features combined with more modern ones, is what made the find so scientifically significant and so scientifically puzzling. How did a species with these ancient anatomical features end up on an island in Southeast Asia? What was its relationship to other human species known from the region, Homo floresiensis, the small-bodied hobbit found on the Indonesian island of Flores? Was it a descendant of a very early human migration out of Africa, isolated on Luzon and evolving independently over hundreds of thousands of years? These are questions the scientific community is still actively working to answer. Part 3. How did they get here? Here the mystery deepens, because getting to Luzon was not simple, even 67,000 years ago. The Philippines has never been connected to the Asian mainland by a land bridge in the way that, for example, parts of what is now Indonesia were connected during periods of low sea level in the last ice age. Luzon, specifically, has been an island, separated from the mainland by deep open water, for far longer than any human species has existed, which means whoever reached Luzon 67,000 years ago, or possibly much earlier, crossed open sea to get there. Deliberately or accidentally, by raft or by some other watercraft, they made an ocean crossing. Animated map, Southeast Asia during the last glacial maximum, sea levels lower, land bridges visible between some islands, but a clear channel of deep water still separating Luzon from the mainland. This is not a minor detail. For decades, the conventional scientific view held that intentional ocean crossings by early humans were a relatively recent cognitive achievement, something that fully modern Homo sapiens developed, not older or more archaic human species. The evidence from Callao Cave challenges that assumption directly. Either the ancestors of Homo Luzonensis crossed open water intentionally, implying cognitive and technological capabilities previously not attributed to such ancient populations, or they arrived by some other means, perhaps swept out to sea during storms or floods and surviving the crossing by chance. Neither explanation is fully satisfying. Both are under active scientific investigation, and both have implications that ripple well beyond the Philippines, into the broader understanding of how and when our genus first moved out of Africa and across the world. Part 4. Homo Luzonensis was not alone. The Callao Cave discovery did not happen in isolation. It was part of a pattern of findings emerging from island Southeast Asia that was collectively rewriting the story of early human migration. On the Indonesian island of Flores, a separate species, Homo floresiensis, discovered in 2003, had already demonstrated that small-bodied, archaic humans with unexpected anatomical features could persist on islands, isolated from mainland populations, far longer than the conventional timeline had suggested. The hobbit of Flores was confirmed to have survived until as recently as 50,000 years ago, overlapping in time with the arrival of modern humans in the region. Split-screen map showing Flores and Luzon marked, separated by ocean, both circled as discovery sites, connecting line between them labeled island dwarfism/isolated evolution. The parallel between Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis is striking. Two small-bodied, anatomically distinctive human species, each isolated on a separate island, each showing a mosaic of ancient and more modern features, each surviving far longer into prehistory than the standard human migration narrative had predicted. Some researchers have proposed that both species may descend from a very early, pre-modern human migration out of Africa, possibly Homo erectus or a related species, that reached island Southeast Asia and then evolved independently in isolation, on separate islands, over hundreds of thousands of years. Others have raised questions about whether the mosaic of features observed in the Callao Cave bones might reflect something more complex. Interbreeding between populations, developmental differences in small-bodied individuals, or features whose significance we don't yet fully understand. The scientific debate is active, genuinely open, and unresolved. That is not a weakness of the discovery. It is exactly what a finding this significant is supposed to produce. Part 5. The rhinoceros in the room. Now add another layer, because Callao Cave is not the only site in the Philippines that has produced evidence of astonishingly ancient human activity. In 2018, in the Kalinga province of northern Luzon, not far from Callao Cave. A separate team of researchers published findings from a site called Kalinga. There, in sediment layers dated to approximately 709,000 years ago, they found something remarkable. The butchered remains of a rhinoceros. The bones had been cut with stone tools. The marrow had been extracted. This was not the work of a predator. It was the work of a thinking, tool-using hominin, deliberately processing an animal carcass for food. Close-up reconstruction illustration of stone tool marks on ancient bone, the precise cut marks made 700,000 years ago, preserved in the fossil record. 709,000 years ago, in Luzon. This finding does not tell us which species of hominin was responsible. No hominin bones were found at the Kalinga site alongside the butchered rhinoceros, but it confirms, beyond reasonable doubt, that some member of our genus was present in the Philippines more than 700,000 years before Homo Luzonensis lived in Callao Cave, and more than 700,000 years before any modern human arrived. The Philippines, it turns out, was not a late addition to the story of human prehistory. It was part of the story far earlier than the field had imagined. Part 6. What it means for the bigger picture. Step back from the specific findings and consider what they collectively suggest about the larger story of human prehistory. The standard model of human migration, sometimes called the Out of Africa framework, describes modern Homo sapiens leaving Africa roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, spreading first across southern Asia and eventually reaching Australia, East Asia, and eventually the Americas. It's a well-supported framework built on decades of genetic, fossil, and archaeological evidence. But the evidence from the Philippines complicates the timeline, not by overturning the framework, but by revealing that the islands were not empty waiting rooms that modern humans simply passed through. They were places where earlier human populations had already been living for hundreds of thousands of years, evolving in isolation, leaving their own mark on the landscape long before our direct ancestors arrived. Global map animation, human migration routes rippling outward from Africa, multiple arrows converging on Southeast Asia, the Philippines highlighted as a distinct node rather than a stopping point. This raises a question that paleontologists and geneticists are actively investigating. Did modern humans, when they eventually reach the Philippines, encounter Homo Luzonensis? Did the two species overlap, as modern humans and Neanderthals did in Europe, and as modern humans and Denisovans did in Central Asia? Genetic evidence has shown that modern humans carried traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, proof of interbreeding between species that once overlapped geographically. If modern humans and Homo Luzonensis occupied the same islands, even briefly, traces of that encounter might exist in the DNA of people living in the Philippines today. This research is in its very early stages, but the possibility is real and actively being investigated. Part 7. The work that remains. The story of the first humans in the Philippines is, by every honest measure, still being written. The 12 bones and teeth from Callao Cave represent only a fraction of what likely survives in Philippine soil. The archipelago's thousands of islands, its cave systems, its riverbeds and sediment layers, represent an archaeological frontier that has barely been scratched. Funding constraints, logistical challenges, and the sheer scale of the task mean that the vast majority of sites that might yield evidence of early human habitation have never been excavated. Aerial drone shot, dense tropical karst limestone landscape, cave mouths visible in the cliffs, jungle stretching in every direction, the scale of unexplored territory overwhelming. What has already been found, the butchered rhinoceros at Kalinga, the bones of Homo Luzonensis at Callao Cave, suggests that what remains to be discovered may be equally or more significant. Every new excavation season brings the possibility of another date, another bone, another piece of a story that keeps pushing further back than anyone expected. Filipino archaeologist Armand Mijares, who has led much of this work, has described the Philippines as one of the most important and most underexplored regions in the world for understanding human prehistory. The evidence so far suggests he is right.
Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share your reaction in the comments. Subscribe to the channel